the final exam, there will be 100 questions total. And the first 50 questions is all multiple choice. And it's going to cover materials from exam 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so recall that each of those exams had 50 questions themselves and were more detailed. So that means that I only have 50 questions to cover all of the materials in exam 1, 2, and 3. So these questions are not going to be as detailed as what you saw in the exam 1, 2, and 3, and cover more of overall. Do you know the overall big picture of those chapters? Okay, and it's 50 questions, all multiple choice, no fill in the blank answers. Okay, so that's the comprehensive portion. Then the other 50 questions, you can think of it as exam 4 really, because the other 50 questions, 10 of those are short answers, like you've seen them before. And those are always going to be at the bottom at the end. And 40 multiple choice. And the 50 questions will cover the new materials, which include the urinary system, endocrine system, female, and male reproductive. So you can see that 50 questions are spread out between just these chapters. So these questions are going to be a lot more detailed, okay? So strategically, I would say that for this week, I would focus a lot on the last chunk of materials. And as I'm focusing on this last chunk of materials, I would review and just kind of go through the old stuff that you've studied. Like, divide it up. Do exam 1, Monday to Tuesday, exam 2, Wednesday to Thursday, and then exam 3 on Friday and so on. Okay? Any questions on this so far?
For like the last 10 questions, would it be focusing on the last unit?
Yeah, so, yep. So the short answers and the 40 multiple choice questions are focusing on whatever's in this box right here.
Even the last 10 short questions?
So think of it as exam 4.
Okay.
Yep, you know how you saw the other exams? Lab final will be, yep. So I'll talk about the lab final a little bit, yep. But did that make sense though? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so it would be like 40 of those questions would be multiple choice concerning the urinary system, endocrine system, and female and male. And the last 10 question would also be urinary system, endocrine, female and male, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so then about the lab, let me go back here. So then for the lab final, oh, I should also mention the final exam, you will have 100 minutes. So everything's still basically the same, 100 minutes. Okay, so then for the lab final, you have 50 questions. And they're all, it's still the same in terms of you have to type in the answer, spelling counts, okay? But about 25 is on the old materials. And about 25 is on the new materials. Okay, and it's still the same thing. You have 50 minutes. And they are all, you have to type in answer and spelling counts. Okay. Questions on the lab final? Okay, and hopefully you're used to the logistics. You know you have to use respondus. And you also are required to use webcam. And now more than ever, it's really important to do, because it's a longer period of time, so respondents can check students a little bit more. You want to make sure you do that thorough environmental scan. Okay, and I've added a video to show you kind of what is expected, and that's the video that I've been sharing since exam 1, 2, and 3 of like how to do an environmental scan. Do you have any questions about that?
Is it like just show yourself and around you, basically?
Yep.
Is
And
it due
again, I don't watch any student's video unless respondent says, they were concerned, please watch this. And that's when I really rely on your environmental scan to show, yep, the student was fine. They were just, respondents was being glitchy or whatever, and there was nothing around them, so they're fine. So I don't even watch anything else, as long as your environmental scan is thorough and it shows that there was nothing around you. And that means to your right, to your left, and then just kind of a scan around the room in terms of like what's in front of you. Yeah, so check the video example I gave you of the environmental scan.
Is it due on Sunday?
I'm sorry?
Is it due on Sunday or Monday?
Oh, that's a great question. So your final exams, there is a difference because the last day of class is on Sunday. We had to move it, so you have from Friday to Sunday 11 p.m. Central Standard Time. So you do not have until Monday, because the last day of class is Sunday, and that's when, unfortunately, you have to take the exam by. Okay, that's a great question. Others? Okay, so I'll use the rest of the time to talk about the urinary system and make sure I save some time for the endocrine, where the hormones come from. Okay. All right. So in this review session, we're going to talk about the urinary system and the endocrine system, and then in this evening session, I'll reserve that for reproductive. Okay. So for the urinary system, you want to make sure you can list and describe the functions of the kidney, which include it filters the blood. And by filtering the blood, it means it both cleans it and it removes the waste. Okay, because can someone remind me what's in blood? What's the composition of blood? It's a nice review for your comprehensive section anyways. What's in blood? Yep. So you've got plasma, which contains mostly water, but it also contains hormones, proteins, waste, nutrients, lipids, etc. Okay. Blood will also have red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Okay. So you'll find that the solid components of blood does not move from the blood vessels into the nephron. Okay, so there's a filtration mechanism which we have the different processes of urine formation, right? So in the filtration portion, it separates the solids from the liquids. Okay, so really what's being filtered is the plasma. Okay, so when we say filtering blood, it's really filtering the plasma, because large things like red blood cell, white blood cells, and platelets should not cross the filtration membrane in the kidney. Okay, so when we say filtering blood, it's really filtering the plasma, and plasma, we know it's mostly water. It does have waste though. Okay, and it may have extra solutes, not solutes, but it has extra solutes such as sodium, potassium, and so on. So your urinary system, particularly your kidney, helps to make sure that all those levels of the substances in plasma, particularly waste, okay, is maintained in terms of the level it needs to be at. And if it's too much, it excretes it out. If it's so that's the way in which it maintains that balance. So let's say in your body you have 100 liters of water. Okay, let's say you drink water, you drink a lot of water. Let's say you drank 5 liters. Okay, and your body only needs 100 liters, and now it's 105 liters. So the kidney is going to take that 5 liter and it's going to pass it along through your kidneys to your ureter, to your urinary bladder, and then excrete it. Okay, so it helps to keep that balance of what is needed in your body. Okay, so one of the things that we talked about earlier is that in nervous conduction, okay, in nerve conduction, what happens? What is needed in order for that action potential to occur? You're close, okay? So you've got movements. So yep, you need ATP, and then you talked about calcium. But remember, in nervous conduction, in impulse conduction, what's actually moving in depolarization and repolarization? There you go. Sodium, oops. Sodium is moving in, what's moving out? So sodium is moving in, exactly. Sodium is moving into the neuron and potassium is moving out, okay? Eventually, after depolarization, you have repolarization. And in depolarization, sodium moves in. Repolarization, potassium moves out. And you have hyperpolarization, and then you have to switch, you have to actively pump the sodium back out and actively pump the potassium back in, right? But the potassium doesn't always get back in at the same rate that it left, which means now what do you have in blood? An excess of potassium, okay? So because there's an excess of potassium levels in blood, your kidneys are going to help to remove that extra potassium, okay? So your kidneys work along with the other systems of your body to help maintain the levels of things that are needed in your body. Okay, so another example would be sugar. Okay, if your sugar is too high in your blood, your body is going to try to store that sugar into your cells. But if the sugar level in blood is still too high, what's going to happen? Exactly. Your kidneys are going to say, nope, that sugar level is too high. It's got to be excreted in urine. So you pee it out. So that's just some examples in which how your urinary system, particularly your kidney, filter the blood. It not only cleans it by removing the waste products, it also helps you to keep a balanced level of the substances in your body. Okay, and it will remove the waste. In other words, you're going to pee it out, you're going to urinate it, and whatever you need, it's going to take it back. Okay, so the analogy that I make of the kidneys is like a washing machine. Okay, so here's my low-tech washing machine. Okay, so you throw in your dirty clothes, right? Okay. And you want to be able to separate your clothes from the dirt. Okay, so not only do you clean it, but you actually also remove the dirt, but you also want to keep the clothes intact so that you can put it back in, you can use it again. Okay, because everything in plasma goes to be filtered, but you want to keep the stuff that you need, so you need to have a way to keep it, and then you have to have a way to remove the dirt from your clothes. And so that's why technically, when you have the urine formation, there are 3 steps. The first step is to get the substance into the washer. So we call that filtration. Okay. Then you have the reabsorption, taking back the good stuff. And then you have secretion, which is, let's say along the way, you have like last minute, you found another socks that was dirty. You still want to have a way to toss it back in last minute. Okay. So that's why I use the analogy of a washing machine whenever I talk about kidneys and how they filter blood, right? So in addition to that, by filtering blood, it also helps to regulate water volumes. Can you tell me how? How by filtering blood does it help regulate water volume? What's the connection? Yeah, exactly. So if there's too much water, like the example I gave you earlier, between like your normal water amount is 100 liters, you drank 5 liters, you get rid of it, right? So by cleaning the blood and removing whatever is too much, as well as whatever the waste, it helps to regulate water volumes. And you're right, by regulating water volume, it also regulates blood pressure. You're absolutely right. Okay, so by regulating water volume, it regulates blood pressure, because blood pressure is based on how much water is in your body. Okay, and more specifically, how much water is in your blood. So if the kidneys are filtering out a lot more water than normal, what's going to happen to your blood pressure? Is it going to increase or decrease or stay the same? So one more time. If the kidneys remove more water than normal, is your blood pressure going to increase, decrease, or stay the same? Absolutely, it's going to decrease. But let's say something happens and your kidneys doesn't filter out the water. It keeps everything, and you're drinking water throughout the day. So you're increasing your water volumes without your kidneys. Sometimes that happens when people have kidneys that don't work very well, and you end up keeping all that water and you don't urinate at all. What's going to happen to your blood pressure? Exactly. So hopefully at this point, you can see the connection between how the urinary system connects to how water volumes are regulated in the body. And anything related to water volumes, such as blood pressure, is influenced by that. Okay, not only blood pressure, but also pH. Okay, what determines pH values? Yes, hydrogen ions. And guess what? Hydrogen ions are a component of plasma. And if your kidneys filter out more hydrogen ions, it's going to cause your blood to become what? Exactly. It's going to cause your blood to become basic. And if it doesn't filter out enough hydrogen ions, the reverse would be true. Then your blood pH is going to be acidic. And this is just like one small example of how all the body systems are interconnected with each other. I mean, it's pretty darn cool how your body is regulated. Okay. All right. So then you also should know about the gross anatomy of a kidney. In other words, be able to know what's the fibrous capsule, what's the hilum, the associated blood vessels, the renal cortex, the renal medulla, and the renal pelvis. If any of these terms are unfamiliar with you, you want to make sure you go through the worksheet, because the worksheet on the urinary system, because in that I kind of go through, I ask you to list the parts of the gross anatomy. Okay. Then you want to talk about the microscopic anatomy, and the main thing in the kidneys is the nephron. Okay. The nephron is the functional unit of a kidney. What does that mean? The nephron is the functional unit of a kidney. Remind me, what does that mean? I use it all throughout this term. What does functional unit mean? Yeah, it's what does the process of what the kidney is responsible for. Okay, so the nephron includes the following parts: the renal corpuscle, which includes the glomerulus and glomerular capsule, the renal tubules, which include the PCT, the nephron loop, and the DCT. By the way, what does PCT stand for? Come on, I know you know it. What's this PCT stand for? Yes, the proximal convoluted tubule, and then that means that the DCT stands for the distal convoluted tubule, okay? And then the collecting duct. So in the description, make sure you know the structure of the nephron, the function of the nephron, and the tissue lining. Okay, and the same thing is true as in the digestive and respiratory system. The tissue lining, oftentimes students get really stuck up on that because they're like, oh, it's so hard, but not really, right? Try not to memorize the tissue lining, as more of connecting how structure and function work hand in hand. Okay, it should make sense why the tissue is lined with what they are, because it connects structure with function. Okay, then you also want to be able to tell me the process of urine formation, and then the extra structures, which include the ureters, right? Because you have two of them, one on the right, one on the left, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. So same thing for these three. It's not as much detail, but do know the structure, the function, and the basic layers. And then, of course, end it with knowing how you urinate, the micturition reflex. Yes. Yep. Okay. Questions on the urinary system before I go through it in a little bit more detail? All right. So I don't have time to cover everything on this list. So is there something in this list that you want me to focus on?
I would say the nephron.
The nephron, okay. The urine formation or the micturition reflex. Micturition out of all. Okay, all right. So I'll do the nephron, the urine formation, and then the micturition reflex. And if something I don't have a time to cover, remember I did make a video for my class. So in my class, I cover the majority of these, okay? But there's a difference between watching a video versus interacting, one-on-one with it. So I completely understand that. So I'll try to cover it all, but if not, there's that video as a backup, okay? All right. So I normally will cover the parts, but I'm going to leave that alone so I have time to cover the other stuff. So this is the overall anatomy of the urinary system, and this is more of the gross anatomy of the kidney specifically. So I'm going to bypass that and go straight to the nephron and then the urine formation, and if time, the micturition reflex. Okay. All right. So the nephron has the following parts. Okay, let me get my highlighter. You've got the glomerular capsule. Okay. So the glomerular capsule is this portion right here. Okay. If you've worn gloves before, the gloves cover your hand, right? So the gloves is like the glomerular capsule. So if the gloves are like your glomerular capsule, what would your hand be then? What does the glove cover? The glomerulus, excellent. Okay, so the glomerular capsule is part of the nephron. True or false? The glomerulus is a part of the nephron. False, excellent. Okay, because the glomerulus is surrounded by the glomerular capsule, but it is not a part of the nephron. What is it a part of? Or what is it? What's the glomerulus? Yes, beautiful. It's actually the capillaries. It's the blood vessels. So it is not a part of the nephron, okay? So the nephron consists of the glomerular capsule, which surrounds the glomerulus. In other words, it surrounds a network of capillaries, okay? Beautiful. Now, part of the glomerulus that you need to know is what tissue makes up the glomerulus, and that's going to be simple cuboidal epithelium. Simple cuboidal epithelium. Why should that make sense? Well, what has to happen at the glomerular capsule? What has to happen at the glomerular capsule? Yes, that's exactly it. So filtration has to happen here. Filtration. And because that, it has to be simple, because if it's stratified, too many cells stacked on top of each other, things can't move through. And it's got to be either squamous or cuboidal. And in this instance, it is cuboidal. And this tissue layer allows for the filtration to happen. Okay, so that's the tissue. Simple cuboidal epithelium is the tissue that lines the glomerular capsule. What is that tissue made up of? In other words, what cells make up that tissue? Because you know that that's the hierarchy, right? So cells become tissues, and tissues become organs, and so on, right? So the cells that you find that make up the simple cuboidal epithelium are called podocytes. Podocytes. Cyte meaning cell. Podo meaning what? Cytes meaning cell. Podo meaning what? What does podo mean? Foot. Exactly. Very good. So that means your foot. And the reason why that is let's look at this one really quick. Okay. So in this image of the podocyte, so here's the podocyte. I'm going to highlight it for you. Oh, nope, that color's not good. Here we go. Can you see the pink? Yeah, I'll just, oh, no, why is it not highlighting that? Huh, I cannot highlight over. But anyways, here, maybe green. Yeah, there we go. So I'm shading in the podocyte right here. If you use your imagination, it looks like a foot, doesn't it? Here's the feet, and here's the toes. Okay. Do you see that? So that's a podocyte, and that's what makes up the glomerular capsule. So the glomerular capsule, tissue-wise, is lined with simple cuboidal epithelium, and that tissue, simple cuboidal epithelium, is made up of podocytes. Okay. Now you see that there'll be another podocyte here. So here's a podocyte. Here's another podocyte. There's another podocyte. Okay, so you can see that the podocytes form this area right here, well, what we call the filtration slits, that allow for small substances to move back and forth. And that is filtration. Questions? So really, the lining helps to understand the function. And that's why at the glomerular capsule, filtration happens. Why? Well, because it's lined with simple cuboidal epithelium that has podocytes that allow for filtration to happen through the filtration slits. Okay, all right. The second part is the proximal convoluted tubule. Right next or connecting to the glomerular capsule, and that's why it's called proximal, because it's the closest to the glomerular capsule, is this set right here. Ooh, all this curviness. Okay, because it's curved and not straight, it's convoluted. Because it's closest, it's called proximal, and it's a tube, so it's called tubule. So again, there should not be, you shouldn't have to memorize this. It makes sense. It's called the proximal convolute tubule because it's a set of tubes that's curved and next to the glomerular capsule. Okay. So in this instance, what is this lined with? It's also a simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay. And that automatically should allow you to think, okay, if it's simple and it's either squamous or cuboidal, that means it's going to allow for things to move back and forth. Okay. But in this instance, it does not have the podocytes. So it doesn't have the filtration slits. What it does have is the microvilli. Have you heard of microvilli before? Absolutely. Where did you hear about it before? Just a review for your final. Yeah, I love that. You remembered. I'm so proud. Okay, so exactly. It's in the digestive system. So the microvilli in the digestive system allows you to absorb the nutrients from the blood into the villi. Okay, and then from there into your, from your digestive system, your digestive tract, through the villi into your bloodstream to be distributed, right? So the microvilli on cells means that it allows things to move back and forth, okay? So the microvilli forms the brush border for absorption. And in this case, you first absorb substances in your digestive system, right? And this is the second time you're absorbing things. So technically, we don't call it absorption, but we call it what? What happens here? Yes, that's why it's called reabsorption instead of absorption. Because absorption happened in the digestive system. And this is again happening where you're taking things back into the body. So that's why it's reabsorption. And this process is called reabsorption. Okay? So in reabsorption, the substances that move through the proximal convolute tubule needs to find its way back into your blood vessel through a process called reabsorption. Why do you want to take things back into your blood vessel? Why do you want to take things back, be able to take things back into your blood vessel? Yes, exactly. Because you remember what we said earlier? Everything in plasma is filtered. Nope, not to get rid of the gases, okay? Because reabsorption is to take it back into the body. But you keep that in mind, okay? You keep the carbon dioxide in mind for later on because it is connected, okay? So everything in plasma is filtered. So all these substances right here is filtered. And you need to take back the good stuff or the stuff that you need in your body. You need to take back the glucose. You need to take back the amino acids. You need to take back sodium, potassium, calcium. All of this stuff is you do need in certain levels in the body at all times. So you need to reabsorb it. You need to take it from your urinary tract and take it back. Otherwise, you're going to pee it all out. Okay? So that's why reabsorption is important. Because remember, it's like a washer. You throw your dirty clothes in there, you don't want to lose like the arm of your shirt, right? You need that. You need the stuff that you need back, but you need to get rid of the stuff that's too much or the stuff that is waste. Okay? All right. So that's the proximal convolute tubule. Then the next part is the nephron loop. Okay? So the nephron loop has two parts. It's got this part right here that's moving down, and because it's moving down, it's called the
Descending.
Yep. And then when it moves up, it's called the
Ascending.
Exactly. So again, you shouldn't have to memorize this. It makes sense. It's called the ascending and descending based on what direction it's moving fluid. Okay. So the descending is when it's moving down. Ascending is when it's moving up. Okay. Now get this. You see that there's parts that are chunky, right? Right here. You see that? That are thicker.
Yeah.
And then there are parts that down here that are thinner. Do you see that? Okay. So based on whether it's the thick segment or the thin segment, it's going to be lined with different things. Okay. The thick segment is going to be lined with simple cuboidal epithelium. Now, by the time it gets to the nephron loop, it's still simple cuboidal epithelium, but there's less microvilli, which means what is not happening here as much as it is happening in the proximal convolute tubule.
Absorption.
Movement in general, right? And you're right, absorption is less. And that's why, get this, here's what's reabsorbed at the proximal convolute tubule. Here's what's being reabsorbed at the nephron loop. What's the major difference you notice in these two tables? What do you notice the difference in this one versus this one and this one?
Less.
Yeah. There's much more happening at the PCT. Why is that?
Because as you go down, it's going to digest.
No, there's no digestion happening here. Not necessarily being filtered out either. Why is there less being reabsorbed? Because the term filter, you only want to use the term filter at the glomerular capsule, because that's where filtration happens. By the time it gets to the PCT, the nephron loop, the DCT, we call it either reabsorption or secretion. It's not because of secretion. Secretion is the pink boxes, and we haven't gotten to it yet. So we're focusing on reabsorption in the renal tubules. So my question is, within reabsorption, why is it more at the PCT and less at the nephron loop?
Is it because it's not simple epithelium?
You are real close.
Oh, is it because like there's like a U-turn and it takes time? I don't know.
I love that guessing, absolutely. Let's look at the lining again. So at the proximal convolute tubule, it's lined with simple cuboidal epithelium, which is also lined at the nephron tubule, the simple cuboidal epithelium. But the main difference is that the proximal convolute tubule has lots of microvilli, where the nephron loop has less microvilli. Okay, so there's less microvilli at that point, because at that point, another difference you should note is that look at the substance being reabsorbed. The main larger stuff is all reabsorbed at the proximal convolute tubules. Okay, so we have reabsorbed the majority of what we want back at the proximal convolute tubule. What's remaining to be reabsorbed at the nephron loop are smaller things like the electrolytes, the sodium, the potassium, the chloride. Okay, so that's the thick segments. So the thick segments of the nephron loop right here are lined with simple cuboidal with less microvilli, because there's less things for it to reabsorb. At that part, its responsibility is to reabsorb the salts, the sodium, the potassium, and the chloride. So that's the thick segments of the nephron loop. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Makes sense? Doesn't make sense? Let me know. Okay, all right. Back here. All right, so that's just the thick segment so far. Now, the nephron loop also has the thin segments. So the size, yes, exactly, Aya. Yep. So the thin segments is lined with simple squamous epithelium. Look at that, simple squamous epithelium. Okay, so simple squamous epithelium. And did I talk about microvilli at all here? No, exactly. So by the time it gets to the thin segments, only really small things can move, which means water. So in the thin segments of the nephron loop, of the nephron, the only thing that's moving is what? What's the smallest thing you have left?
What was the question?
Sure. In the thin segment of the nephron loop, it's lined with simple squamous epithelium. At this point, the simple squamous allows for what to move through? So there's no more microvilli to help.
Water?
Yeah, exactly. So let's look back at our picture here. Makes sense. Look, what's being reabsorbed at the thin segments? You answered this already, by the way.
Water.
Yeah. That's kind of cool, right? It makes sense instead of having to memorize, oh my God, this part is water, this, but no, it just makes sense. that the PCT, it has more microvilli, so the majority of reabsorption happens there. By the time it gets to the nephron loop, it depends. The thick segments will allow for whatever remains, which is the cells. And the thin segment, because it's lined with simple squamous, water is what's being reabsorbed. Okay. So without looking at that previous sheet that tells you what things are, can you make a guess of what the distal convolute tubule would be lined with? The distal convolute tubule. This is all that's moving back and forth.
Is it simple cuboidal?
Yes, because it's thicker. Excellent. Is it going to have the same amount of microvilli or less microvilli as the proximal convolute tubule?
Less?
Yeah. You see that? You didn't have to memorize it. It makes sense. Okay. So the distal convolute tubule is simple cuboidal, and to say no is not quite accurate, is little to none microvilli. So the simple cuboidal here is similar to the simple cuboidal that you will find in the thick segments. Okay. So I would say less. I wouldn't say no, none. Okay. But you see how that makes sense? Okay. Okay. So that's the lining. And good. Okay. So we're going to take a closer look at the renal corpuscle. Okay. So the renal corpuscle consists of two parts. What two parts make up the renal corpuscle? What do you see in this image right here? Yes, the glomerulus, which is the blood vessels. And if I were to be really specific, it's the capillaries. Okay, and what else? Yeah, great, the glomerular capsule. What happens at the renal corpuscle? We just covered that earlier. What function of urine formation happens at the renal corpuscle? Not secretion.
Filtration?
Filtration. So this is where you would learn about the filtration membrane. Okay, so the filtration membrane consists of three parts. It consists of the fenestrated glomerular endothelial cells. In other words, the endothelium of the capillary. Because remember, recall that the capillaries contain just the endothelium. So here's the endothelium. And this endothelium, because it belongs to the glomerulus, it's very specified. Look at this. What do you see here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What are these? Pores. Exactly. They're holes, right? So that's why this portion is called the fenestrated endothelium. Fenestrated, it's a German term for window because they're little holes, right? So that's the unique thing about the endothelium of the glomerulus compared to the endothelium of the other parts of your capillary. Okay, and that's to increase the filtration. Okay, so that is the first part of the filtration membrane. The second part is the basement membrane. That's this right here, this blue part right here, the basement membrane that separates the endothelium of the capillary and the podocytes of the glomerulus. Okay, so the basement membrane. And then last, you have what? What's this thing? We talked about it earlier, right? It's the podocytes. Mm-hmm. It's the podocytes of what? What do the podocytes belong to? of the glomerulus. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, you are right and I am wrong. Glomerular capsule. Glomerular capsule. Thank you. You corrected me. Absolutely. Glomerular capsule. Okay, so that's what forms the filtration membrane. You've got the fenestrated endothelium of the glomerulus. You've got the basement membrane that separates, and then you have the podocytes of the glomerular capsule. Okay, so that has been a test question in the past. What is the filtration membrane? Okay, so you want to make sure you know this. And then again, it shouldn't be memorization. It makes sense because we've already talked about the lining of all these structures, so it just should come up. Okay, so the renal corpuscle includes the glomerulus and the glomerular capsule. What's the glomerulus? It's a capillary. What lines the capillary endothelium? Is there anything special about the lining? Yeah, it's fenestrated because it allows for a higher filtration. Then you have the glomerular capsule. What's the glomerular capsule made up of? It's made up of simple cuboidal epithelium with microvilli, and specifically the cells that form that are the podocytes. Voila, you have the 3 linings. Okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Makes sense, doesn't make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. All right. So by doing that, that actually helps you to figure out not only the parts of the nephron, but also the filtration, the urine formation steps. Okay, at least part of it. Okay, you've got the filtration, you've got the reabsorption, and then the secretion is similar to the reabsorption but goes in the opposite direction. Okay, so we talked about the nephron. Can you list the parts of the nephron for me again?
Okay, so the glomerular capsule is not really part of the nephron. It's just like blood capillaries and then simple cuboidal epithelium.
Very good. Exactly. The renal corpuscle is where filtration happens, but it is not the nephron. Because what the only part of the renal corpuscle that's part of the nephron is what?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Sure. So you established that the renal corpuscle is not a part of the nephron. That is correct. Because the renal corpuscle has 2 parts to it, right? So which of those 2 parts is actually part of the nephron? Let me go back to that slide.
The glomerular capsule is the part of the nephron.
Exactly. Yep. And you actually just started our first part, the glomerular capsule. Can either you or someone else finish? So you've got the glomerular capsule, and then what do you have?
The proximal convoluted tubule.
Yep. That becomes the
Nephron loop.
Yep. And that
Descending
becomes the DCT. And then the DCT, and this is why I didn't quite add it, because some books say that the collecting duct is not a part of the nephron, and others say it is a part of it. So I kind of left it a little separate, but what would then continue from the distal convolute tubule would be the collecting duct. Okay? And by the time the fluid ends up in the collecting duct, at this point, it's called
The ascending.
nope. The fluid is called what? Oh, we didn't talk about that. There are different names for the fluids. Okay, so in terms of fluid, you have these 3 options, and this is on the test, so you should know this. I'm going to ask you what the fluid are called at different parts of this whole process. You have plasma, you have filtrate, and you have urine. So what is the fluid called when it's found in the collecting duct?
Urine?
Yeah. That's right. What's the fluid called when it's in the distal convoluted tubule?
Filtrate.
Yep. What's the fluid called when it's in the nephron loop?
Plasma.
Hmm? Still filtrate. What's the fluid called when it's in the proximal convoluted tubule? Yes, you got it. Filtrate. What's the fluid called when it's in the glomerular capsule? Plasma because of, no, glomerular capsule is not the capillaries. So what would the fluid
Oh,
be
it's
called?
plasma, right?
No, it's filtrate. Okay. So anytime fluid is in the nephron, in other words, if it's in the glomerular capsule, the proximal convoluted tubule, the nephron loop, or the distal convoluted tubule, it's always called filtrate. If it's in the glomerulus, it's called what? Plasma. It's only called plasma if it's in the blood vessel. It's only called filtrate if it's in the nephron. And it's called urine after or at the collecting duct. Yep. Okay.
Okay, so one more time. So technically the renal capsule isn't part of the nephron loop and the glomerular capsule is.
Wait. Say that question one more time.
You said the glomerular capsule is not part of the nephron loop, right? The nephron, I mean, sorry.
Is that what I said?
Yes, and the renal capsule.
Nope.
Oh, is that the renal capsule you said?
So the renal corpuscle, not the capsule.
Oh, sorry.
No. This is the best time to make those mistakes. The renal corpuscle includes the glomerulus and the glomerular capsule. Because it includes two parts, it is not a part of the nephron necessarily. Only one of those components is the nephron. So you have two, the renal corpuscle has two parts, the glomerulus and the glomerular capsule. Is the glomerulus a part of the nephron?
Yes. Where is that?
What does the class think? What do you think? And tell me why. Is the glomerulus a part of the nephron?
No,
Why?
because it's a blood vessel and it's part of the
That's
capillary.
exactly. Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so the
I got the
glomerulus
mixed
is
up.
not a part of the nephron because we just went through the parts of the nephron, right?
Yeah.
The nephron consists of the glomerular capsule only, the proximal convoluted tubule, the nephron loop, and the distal convoluted tubule.
Okay, I got the glomerular capsule and the glomerulus mixed up.
Yep, that happens, and that's why we're reviewing. Yep, and now on the test, you're going to get it right. Okay, this is the best time to make mistakes because you have to make mistakes to learn. Okay, all right. So unfortunately, that's all the time I have for today. Not for today, but for this first session. I will continue in the evening session. In the meantime, is there any last questions? on this material. So now that we have this first part, I want you to start to think about your information. Okay, you have the bits and parts, but you have to put them together. So I want you to think about that before you either come to this evening session or before you watch the video of this evening session if you're not able to attend.